God give me the things to say, the things to do, the things to put in people's hearts. May these words reach people that needs to hear. May these words come from the heart, as they always do, in a way that is in accordance with what you want me to say and do, and more importantly, um, be authentic. Don't change who you are. Don't have me. Amen. So I've been trying to record this video a couple times. This is like my fifth time recording it. I tried to record it twice yesterday. Actually, sorry, three times yesterday. I didn't like the lighting. And I tried to record it 5 minutes ago. Somebody was cutting grass. There's so many parts to this. It's always funny where you're like, man, you're just trying to get something across, and it really just means a lot to me. All the support that people have shown over the past day or two to a video that really just came out of left field. It was something that I was sitting on. It was something that I was thinking about, and I was talking about just the highest form of love is letting people go, and I didn't recognize like how hard it is for a lot of people to digest that truth. And I think for me, because a lot of these things I'm either applying in my own life or I talk to my clients about in my therapeutic space, it's always intriguing to see the concept of accepting the loss of a act of love that really intrigues me. I think grief is already an interesting space and process, but I think to grieve people while they're still alive is a very it's a very unique thing because I think a lot of times we don't really. I think why a lot of people struggle is because there's certain moments in music and restaurants. There's certain things that people connect people to, and when you kind of lose that part, you feel like you lose a part of yourself and your identity. And I never want to say that people who experience these things or struggle with these things or they don't have the tools. I think accepting the loss of someone in your life actively is arguably one of the hardest things to do while that person is still here. Because you care for them, and I think we have to get back to that notion, especially in the social media space, especially why I've been so big on being authentic in that. Is that I don't really care for the separatist style of content. Never once will I tell anybody on platforms that we don't need people or that the love that men and women give for each other doesn't matter or just the love that people give doesn't matter because it does. I think that rhetoric is very dangerous when people are projecting their pain and trauma onto the world, and while their feelings matter, we need to make sure that we stick with the narrative that what is important to humanity is connection. What people need is connection. What people value is connection. And so when you actively lose it, you can easily become jaded. And I understand that. I've been jaded several times over. And I think what I had to learn was that I was allowing my ego to play a part in certain experiences that just no longer serve where I was at. I'm going to go back to the notion that you can lose people and it doesn't make them a bad person. You can lose people and you can understand that might be one of the best loves you'll ever experience in your life. You can lose people and accept that sometimes you cannot put a square and a circle together. I tell my clients that all the time. I tell myself that all the time because it's true. When we connect with people, whether it's personal or an intimate relationship, it does have to be in alignment to who you are and where you're trying to go. And when you lose sight of that, it's very easy to compromise your own values to what is important to you in order to make something stick and work. And that's the hardest thing to do because I do think we fall into the potential trap often. And what I mean by potential trap is that we see somebody, we see all the great things, we see what they can be. We see what we know they can be. However, many times people stay stuck in that trap because they do not make the conscious decisions to work on those things to improve themselves. We have to remember that your presence cannot create persuasion alone. You cannot persuade anybody to change because of who you are. I think a lot of us fall into that trap because we think, well, this is who I am. I bring this great energy. I bring so much life into this person's life, and they'll change for me. They have to change for me. They don't have to change for you. They don't. They gotta want to change for themselves. That's something that one was either on the receiving end of or something that I did myself, and I can own that. Like there was many people I know that really stuck on the line. They was patient with me, and I just was so stubborn enough to not change in areas that would have benefited them. And so when those things didn't work out, I had to sit and like think with it and be like, dang, that was my fault, right? What I have learned and what I've taken years to do this. It's like I have driven the notion that there is some losses you have to experience in order to be the person that you want to become. And sometimes that is a long lasting feeling of sadness and sorrow, and sometimes it's a quick lesson that you can apply to the next. However, there are people that come into your life that are just in your life for a season. Not everybody's meant to be in your life forever. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow, and that's something that I will forever stick by. Is that some people that we connect with are literally just part of the lesson plan for a greater purpose ahead. And it's just, I always say it's not about things not working out. I think why people struggle with things ending is usually because most things end very chaotic. They end very abruptly. Sometimes people feel blindsided. Sometimes people feel betrayed. Sometimes people feel misunderstood. And sometimes people don't have that space for a conversation. So as I was going through the most recent video and I saw somebody talk about this, I wanted to kind of mention this in this video. Somebody asked pretty much about the idea of it was essentially like closure, but more so about, if we let this person go, uh, how do we get them back? And two things. One, I think closure is a very interesting concept. I think closure can be beneficial, and I also think closure can be very detrimental. I think when you're making a decision that is requiring you to take a step back, whether it's for yourself or you just see the relationship or friendship or whatever not being beneficial, it does take a very emotionally mature person, depending on the situation, to sit down and tell that person directly why something does not work out. I do think that people deserve a conversation up to a decision. I personally, this is me, I personally don't respect people who hide behind phones to send messages, and I've done it myself. So I think these are things that I had to learn over time is that if you're going to make a decision and you're not already considering the other person because you're leaving, and again, this is if the relationship is at or a friendship is at a standard where it just things aren't working out. It's nothing extreme, right? There's extremes where you just have to leave. Makes sense. I'm talking about in a situation where this is no longer serve you. I do think people deserve the right to have a face-to-face conversation, or at least a FaceTime conversation to engage. Does not mean they have to persuade your decision. Does not mean you have to change your mind. But people do deserve the type of respect to address something head on. I think what people tend to do, and I know we have to work on this as a society, they use their phone as a shield of protection to not deal with the emotions of hurting somebody else. You're already going to hurt them by the decision 9 times out of 10, especially if you know how they feel about you. They're probably going to feel blindsided by the situation. I think people do deserve the right and the respect to have that conversation, to at least understand. You don't have to change your narrative. You don't have to change anything, right? But people will respect you more if you do it in a way that could be respected. Again, I think a lot of times people are struggling with this emotional tug of war on overly focusing on not being the villain in somebody's story. They end up being the villain in that person's story and their own story as well, because they know deep down inside if something should have been done in a way that is going to be commendable. Most people will respect honesty over ignorance. Most people will respect honesty over cowardice. Those things matter. Again, because when you're dealing with people, especially, you have to consider all parties involved. Even if you're making a decision for yourself, for your own love, for your own worth, for your own respect, people still deserve the respect to be told directly. And I know the next question is, well, what if they don't leave you alone? You can block them, right? There's other stages that you can do because sometimes it does take multiple conversations for it to like seep in people's minds. And I think we really have to be more observant of the people that we're with. Are we with somebody who's more anxious? Are we with somebody who's more avoidant? How do we navigate the conversation? I just always say do your part to make sure that you're doing it with the highest sense of regard and respect for that other person. Uh, I don't think you have to stay in situations just because of the time. I don't think you have to stay in situations because they have expressed their love to you if it's harmful for you. If it's not something that's fitting within your mode, you have every right to walk away. I tell people that all the time. You have every right to walk away. Just give people the proper respects to at least do it in a way where they can respect you later down the line. I think again, um, this is why a lot of people struggle with forgiveness. In my opinion, this is why a lot of people struggle with uh, just having some resentment and hatred in their heart because they replay certain situations that we know, we always typically know I'm gonna hold us to a higher standard of intelligence of how this situation is going to play out with that person. You have to ask yourself when it's all said and done, have I presented this in the best way possible? Have I presented this in a way where if I had to have a conversation down the line, I know in my heart of hearts I did it the way that was important to me. Um, you know, somebody asked a question yesterday, and they was like, "Well, how do you deal with forgiveness and like especially with betrayal?" And that's something that I have to admit that that took me a while to get with and understand. I think for me, I'm a man of principle. There's certain principles that are just hard for me to kind of slide by. Portrayal is one of them. Especially again, I know people who really know me for real. They know how I operate. They know what's important to me. So they're gonna know when they're doing something that's gonna betray me because I personally take loyalty very serious. I'm somebody that again I believe that I would give you the shirt off my back if I feel like I can trust you. And so I think even if it's a decision where you have to separate yourself from me, I do think the way that you go about it will say a lot more about how we proceed moving forward. Because again, I think people deserve the proper respect. So, anyways, uh, you know, with betrayal, you have to learn that everything that has happened to you isn't about you. Everything that happened to you is not about you. How people how people act towards you is sometimes a reflection of themselves. How people treat you is often a reflection of themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of people are struggling with how they feel about themselves and what has happened to them that they do take it out on people with no intent or no with no remorse, and they want you to feel bad for their story. And so, when you think about forgiveness, again, as I mentioned, forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person. You have to forgive the other person so you can forgive yourself. Because I do think a lot of times we beat ourselves up for certain decisions of people that we connect with. At the end of the day, I'm always a believer that we see things in people sometimes even they don't see it themselves, and we know the type of person that people can be. And I don't think there's something wrong with looking at the goodness of people, regardless of how they present themselves, because everybody has the ability to change. You just have to ask yourself, do you want to change? Do you want to be that person that uh, really makes an impact in the world or in this relationship or etc. Um, I think lastly, you just have to remember that your greatest your greatest strength can also be your biggest downfall when it comes to people. And I say this in the most respectful way. If you're a very giving person, there's people who will try to take advantage of you. If you're a very forgiving person, there's people who will try to stretch your limits of patience. If you're a very understanding person, there'll be people who will try to confuse you and manipulate you to see how much of your self is going to stand in this place to love. I will always say that love should not be confusing. It should be clear. Even with the emotional distress and traumas and triggers that we may carry, I think as people we do have a layer of understanding to express these things. And I also do think that people have the intelligence to know if they're doing something, what they're doing to somebody actually is going to create a hindrance or a stage of growth. And so when you do things that is intentionally hurting people, if you do things that is intentionally putting people in an emotional space, you are part of the problem. And the person receiving it is part of the problem as well because they have to know when to take that step back. Again, you cannot love your way through trauma. You cannot love your way through pain. You cannot love your way through manipulation. There's absolutely nothing you can do in those situations, especially if it is intentional. We have to go back to being accountable as a whole. We have to go back to being accountable within ourselves, and we have to mainly stick to the values that are important to us. As I've mentioned, one of the things to me, to why many relationships fail, is over compromising our values for the sake of potential. We talk about it online every day anyways. Everybody's talking about not selling for this and that. Same thing has to happen with your values. And I think that's the one piece that we miss out on. I think a lot of our selection process for people is external, and while that matters, most of the things in our life can temporarily change at any point. So how somebody treats you when they don't have something, rather it is the let me take it back. How people treat you on their low end of life will tell you a lot more how they treat you on their high end. And I think a lot of people don't stick around for that low end because they don't want to see that. It gets a little too uncomfortable. We got to ask ourselves, are we really available in that space to accept people at the low end? Because at the end of the day, we will all have a low end that we have to experience, and we all pray to God that we have somebody that's with there. We pray to God there's somebody there for us during that moment of time. That's how you know somebody really cares about you. It's not what they buy you. It's not the nice gestures that they do. It is when you need them the most. When they need them the most, how do they show up for you? Do they emotionally support you? Are they physically there? Are they stopping everything that they can to make sure that you're safe? Are you their safe space? If you have to ask yourself that question more than once, or you have to think about it more than once, I will respectfully say you might want to reevaluate the people in your life because that matters. Relationships is about service. I will go back to that because it's the truth. Your ability to serve people and to serve one another and to serve yourself. Are you still getting some sort of self love out of this? Are people pouring love back into you? Those things matter. So, with that being said, remember that everything's a choice. Relationships is about value, and loving yourself is just as important as people loving you. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all.